Welcome once again to the Nerd Corp YouTube channel. Got a bit of a headache. All those years playing football might finally be catching up to me. Concussions and the like. The concussions! Look at the concussions! Don West's greatest call ever. Bound for Glory '06. Rhino. I think it was either Bound for Glory or No Surrender the previous month. It was Rhino, Christian Cage, and Rhino was beneath a bunch of chairs. I want to say it was Bound for Glory. And Christian was just whacking the mound of chairs on top of Rhino, and Don West just screamed out, "Look at all the concussions!" It never made any sense, but if there was somebody who was more charismatic or excited to be on the announced team next to anyone, it was Don West, and I don't give a fuck what you say. Not great. I mean, I'm not saying by any means he was Gordon Soley or Gorilla Monsoon or Bobby Heenan. I'm just saying he brought enthusiasm. That my friend is appreciated. All right. So full disclosure, we are thinking about launching a Patreon. We're not sure if we're going to do it yet. Just and by we I mean me because I make all the decisions. I know that seems kind of totalitarian, but it's true. Anytime I ever ask anyone else for their opinion, they go, "Hey, man, it's up to you." So I'm like, "All right." So I'm thinking about launching a Patreon. We're not sure if we're going to do it. I mean, we're going to do it eventually. It's just not sure when. Um, I don't want it to be one of those things where you guys feel you have to join or support. But we do have some goals that we want to meet, and in order to better the quality of the videos, the podcasts, and all that, like we do need to upgrade tech and get better internet and better editing software. So I mean, there are things on the docket we need to improve, especially if we're gonna make a real run at this bitch. So that's kind of just a little heads up for now. Outside of that, nothing really has changed. Go to realnerdcorp.com. Follow us on Twitter at nerdcorp, NERDCORP. Like, subscribe, follow us, all that good stuff. Tumblr's nerdcorp.tumblr.com. Website's realnerdcorp.com. And today's video is actually kind of a redo. Although you'll never know. I'll never tell. The first video was fucking terrible. Like, I was trying to do it with the unscripted thing where I would just go in and take my opinion based off the time era and period and go with that and try to be all now. I forgot 2/3 of the year. So I did a little bit of a construction and I'm gonna label these something different. These are our retrospective. Because with Impact Wrestling's 15th year here and all signs pointing to go, I think it's time to let you guys, in on what it used to be like. Now, there was a good time period between 2004-ish and 2005-ish where I had a hard time watching because they stopped doing the weekly pay-per-views and they started airing their shows at 3:30 on a Friday. That was when I was in high school, so I had either football, weightlifting, or track and field that I had to do. So by the time I actually got done with school and sports around April or May, they actually lost their deal. Fox Sports went bye bye. And it wasn't until late September, early October when they landed with Spike TV that I was able to watch them again routinely because trying to get the website to work was not always an easy thing back then. So '04 and '05 is going to be a fun time period. I'm actually rewatching a lot of the impacts from '05. The last few weeks, so we're gonna have a very fun discussion about that. But I actually know about all the pay-per-views during '04 and '05, and so I know a lot about what went on and all the shenaniganry in that time period. But '02, oh boy, we're gonna start at the beginning. Oh boy, '02, what a shit show. Very early on, you could tell that there was a lot of outside influence from the Ed Ferrara, Vince Russo types. Now, Vince Russo, I don't think actually came on until late '02, early '03. And '03, oh god. Oh god. But let's get to '02. And first and foremost, there's not a single show that I would say in '02 that you just had to watch. There's a lot of good matches, like a lot of good matches. But in terms of show, not really. When Ron Killing is your best heel throughout the year, and your top two faces are Jeff Jarrett and AJ Styles, but they spend most of the year as heels. kind of know you fucked up along the way somewhere. So let's start off by talking about kind of the more monumental moments. You know, the firsts. The firsts. First and foremost, Ken Shamrock he wins the NWA World Title in a battle royal that basically contained a wannabe Scott Steiner named Del Rios. Love that dude. Rick Steiner, Jeff Jarrett, Scott Hall, Toby Keith. And he ends up defeating the former WCW wrestler The Wall, now known as Malice, in the main event with Ricky Steamboat as a special guest referee. Ricky Steamboat was actually around a lot the first few episodes because he then refereed the inaugural X Division title match, which would see AJ Styles versus Psychosis, Low-Key, and Jerry Lynn. And Styles would win that with the amazing theme song of Born in the USA. It's terrible. I love Dale Oliver. But early TNA music was terrible. In fact, the best part of the entire opening, AMW's was pretty slick. But the New Church. Oh, that was good. But Jeff Jarrett's entire My World, it just had an opening lineup that included a shot at The Rock unnecessarily. And in later iterations, not even later iterations, but in later years, they would actually just have the dude who sang the song go, yeah, over the Rock portion of the song. So if you listen to an '05 pay-per-view, if you watch Final Resolution where Jeff Jarrett takes on Monty Brown in the main event, you're going to hear the augmentation of the theme song. And I'm like, that's funny. I think he still uses the unedited version, though, on house shows and such. So, interesting little factoid. So, Shamrock wins the world title. Styles wins the X Division. All hunky-dory. And then we have a world tag team title tournament. I think the teams were the West Hollywood Blondes, the Dups, Buff Bagwell and Apollo, and AMW, I think I mentioned. So basically what ends up happening is it comes down to AMW and I think the West Hollywood Blondes. But AMW gets jumped, I think, prior to the match, so they don't have any opponents. So randomly, Jerry Lynn and AJ Styles take up the cause and win the belts, making Styles a two-time champion. So that was funny. And in one of the cooler moments, I know The Rock is half Samoan and half black, but there hasn't been a 100% black wrestler up until this point in 2002 since Ron Simmons back in Double C Double. That's how we say WCW on WrestleCore if you didn't know. Check out WrestleCore. Wednesdays, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Go to mixer.com/nerdcorp. So, in I think it was August, Ron Killings defeated... Was it August? Hang on, let me double check. Yeah, August 7th. Ron Killings defeated Ken Shamrock on the undercard, actually, for the NWA World Title, making him the first black wrestler, first 100% black wrestler, I should say, in, I think, about 10 years. And unfortunately, he would be the only one to really have that moniker until Lashley rolls around, if I remember correctly. So, kind of disappointing. But also kind of awesome that Killings, who is so marred right now in just obscurity up there in Connecticut, gets to have that honor. He was not only the second champion in TNA history, but the first black champion in TNA history. And when you look at other promotions, TNA Impact Wrestling has done really well with promoting and booking black wrestlers in main event scenes. So all the shit they get, they should at least get some compliments for that. And say what you will, Ron Killings really was a good heel. I think a lot of his downfall was that he tried to hold on to the K-Crush, K-Quick gimmick look with the stylized jeans and the cornrows and he looked like he did in WWE, and I think that kind of hurt him. I thought he should have reinvented his persona a bit when he came in here, but he didn't. And I really think that kind of held him back from being a major star, because sometimes when you have such a unique look from where you previously worked, unless you shed that, and evolve past it, you're going to be kind of pigeonholed, and I think that's or pigeon-toed, I should say. And I think that's what happened with Killings is he kind of couldn't get rid of that mid-card look that held him back in WWE. So unfortunate, but he would have a second run later on. I think it was in 2003 or 2004. Not early in, not late in 2004. It had to be early because Jarrett went on for about a year as champion from like June of '04 to May of '05. So had to be some time before then. There actually wasn't a lot of world champions in TNA. In fact, I think besides Killing, Styles, and Jarrett, I don't think anyone else won that belt until Raven did in '05. So 3 years they had three world champions to the best of my knowledge, and I think that's actually kind of impressive when you think about that in the long haul. So that was kind of a cool little thing. The big issue with '02 TNA, the feuds. They were not good. I think the top tag feud was the Disciples of the New Church versus AMW. Jarrett and Killings had a big time feud, and it really borderlined just a racial tension issue because Jarrett was the old school representative, and I'm using quotation marks here, and Ron Killings was the disrespectful new generation. Ah, you know, I don't know how to go with that one. They did have some good promos together, and Ron Killings was, and you have to remember in TNA in this time period when you were put with a celebrity, that spoke highly of you because people were expecting these celebrities to pull in views. So if you were working opposite celebrity, it meant that people were going to want to follow you post segment. That was their mindset back then. And Killings, and forgive me if I fuck up who it was. It was either Hermes Sadler or Jeff Hammond. I want to say it was Jeff Hammond. He had some issues with in mid '02. And that was a big deal because of the fact of what Jeff Hammond represented to the company in terms of views. You know, he had a big show, I think, at the time on ESPN and on what formerly used to be the Speed Channel or Speed Network. So he was a big to do at that time. So it was kind of an interesting little situation developing there. But it wasn't a good feud between Jarrett and Killings. In my opinion, the best feud was definitely the Styles and Lynn feud, which did not really develop as much as you would want it to. And there was rumblings of Sean Waltman AJ Styles feud that could have been really good, but then Styles started. Well, I think Styles was actually already paired with Mortimer Plumtree, and that was the start of his heel run. And I thought that really held him, not held him back, but held that feud back because obviously Waltman would be the heel in that feud ideally. Then the other maiden feud we got was BG James and Jeff Jarrett. Well, it sold 8,000 seats in Australia. For those of you who don't get the reference, World Wrestling All Stars was pre-TNA, post WCW pre-TNA. I want to say their first show happened in like October of 2001, and they had a tournament for the first World Wrestling All Stars Heavyweight Champion. The main event was PG James versus Jeff Jarrett in a cage match. That ended when Bret Hart came out and prevented a Melbourne screw job or where the hell they were. So, yeah, that was fucking terrible. So we go from main feuds to major matches because I do want to kind of sprinkle some stuff into this video that both good and bad. The inaugural battle royal was very interesting and very awesome when you think about what it represented. It was the start of TNA, and you had guys like AJ Styles and Abyss. I don't think AMW were in it though. And those were like the corner pieces of the new era. You know, Jeff Jarrett was going to be obviously a major player, so was Ken Shamrock, and Scott Hall was supposed to be. But Styles and Abyss, who was known as Justice at the time, and Chris Harrison, James Storm were the four guys Jeff Jarrett and Jerry Jarrett were very high on at the time. And I think one of the things that really made TNA work was that they put the time and effort into those wrestlers. So in '04 and '05, when people started to really get eyes on the product, those four guys were front and center with the major feuds. Abyss was in a major match at the first Bound for Glory. AJ Styles was in a major match at the first. So was AMW. These guys were groomed. And see, here's the thing. Too many people think because WWE signs Kevin Owens or Seth Rollins that these guys will be instantly ready, that your future will be instantly ready, that they should be in the main event instantly ready. No, you need 3 to 4 years to develop talent. Once you get once you bring them to your screen, you need 3 to 4 years to get them to a point where they will be viable draws. That's kind of hurt the WWE going forward and has hurt them for years, actually, especially with the Money in the Bank thing, which will be a different video and a different rant on a different day. But this right here in '02 TNA, it wasn't great. Don't twist it. But the seedlings were planted for these four men to become who they needed to become. And I think that's indicative to what Jeff Jarrett can do with talent. Also, other major matches was, of course, the inaugural X Division title match, which was, I think, on the next pay-per-view event, which was the second pay-per-view. You also had a really fun match, I thought, on the July 24th show with Styles and Lynn defeating the Flying Elvises. July 31st possibly had the biggest showdown in terms of name value in a one-on-one match when Jeff Jarrett took on Scott Hall and defeated him. Now, I know some people will say Ken Shamrock on Sabu, but I'm pretty sure it was like some kind of like weird ass submission versus ladder match where Shamrock could win by making Sabu tap and Sabu could win by getting the belt from while it was hanging, and the match ended in a DQ. So fuck that noise. Low-key defeated Styles and Lynn in a triple threat for this X Division title. This was not the ladder match. The ladder match is forthcoming. In what I would have to assume, because I did scroll through these, I may have missed something, but I doubt I did, was the first ever all-black World Heavyweight title match when Ron Killings took on a very, very green Monty Brown. I thought Monty Brown in '05 needed a lot of work. In '02, he needed a lot of work. But Ron Killings actually pulled a pretty solid match out of him. So, what could have been with Monty Brown? And now I understand he left due to personal reasons to help take care of his family. All the respect in the world. But if only we had more time to invest in him because he could have been something special. Lynn defeated Styles and Low-Key in that aforementioned triple threat ladder match for the X Division title on August 28th. This match was spectacular. I think it truly became one of the first true blue X Division standout matches. Like everything prior to this was good, but this was match of the year caliber, and it really put the X Division on the table. It's kind of impressive to see what they were able to do at the time, and the fact that Styles and Loki were basically nobodies. Maybe not nobodies at this point, but who cares are also Rans, I guess you could call them at this point. But this match elevated them significantly. In what I believe to be Scott Hall's one and only NWA title match, I could be wrong. Could be. Ron Killings defeated Scott Hall on the pre-Halloween edition on October 30th to retain the belt. Jerry Lynn defeated AJ Styles. AJ Styles, I believe at this point, had already won the title back from Lynn because Lynn had gotten hurt. And Lynn got the belt back from Styles at this match, and this was on November 6th. Jarrett defeated Killings for his first NWA World title run in TNA on November 20th. And then Jarrett would defeat Curt Hennig in what I believe to be Curt Hennig's last title fight before his passing. And that was December 11th. So, pretty big matches. Nothing that I would say was transcendent or truly remarkable outside of the triple threat ladder match. But these are the matches that I think if you went back and watched, you could see the foundation or the beginnings of what TNA could and would become, especially in its heyday. And I don't think you can shake a stick at that. While I'm not saying these matches should be remembered as the greatest matches of all time in TNA history, in fact, when we get to 05, 06, 07, 08, 09, there's a lot of those in that period. But these are important matches, and I think even if they're not as great as I'm putting them over to be, or if they're better than I've said that they could be, I think you should at least watch to appreciate what the history was, especially in '02 in this era. Early on, TNA tried to bring in a lot of big names. And there's also some very surprising names. So we're going to talk about those next because yeah, I like talking about things that make no sense. So some of the surprising names that showed up were just ridiculous names. I believe CM Punk popped up at this point with Ace Steel. but they weren't really involved in anything yet. This was before Punk debuted as part of the Flock or Raven's Nest or Serotonin. It's all the same thing. But this was before then. So you had CM Punk and you had Alexis Lurie both pop up. The CM Punk and Mickey James. That's kind of funny. The Briscoes, Mark and Jay, Ring of Honor fame, they showed up early on and wrestled mostly as enhancement talents. I mean, they were probably 18, 19, 17 years old. Like, they were young. They were like Jeff Hardy, Matt Hardy in WWE era, like mid-90s era young. So, I mean, they're in their mid-30s now. I mean, they're not spring chickens by any stretch of the imagination. Although I'm pretty sure Mark thinks he's a chicken. Yeah. We are obviously mentioned Scott Hall. One of the names that really surprised me because of what would end up happening is the Shane twins, the Dicks, and we'll get to them in a whole another segment here. But one of the Shane twins' wrestling name, or maybe it's his real name, I don't know, is Michael Shane. He trademarked that name in 2005 when Michael Shane, who was on the X Division roster with Frankie Kazarian, was one half of the X Division champions. Now, actually, the one half of the X Division champions was a year prior. But Shane was with Tracy Brooks at the time. And because of this Shane from the Dicks, the Shane twin Dicks, Michael Shane, because that's Shane, the Shane that we would then become familiar with as Matt Bentley would have to change his name. So I think it's kind of funny that Matt Bentley, who used to go by the name Michael Shane, lost his name due to a former TNA employee who was once known as one half of the Dicks, whose name was Michael Shane. The irony in that is palpable. It's so palpable. Former ECW Vixen Francine showed up in the first few weeks and then was never seen again. Like dust in the wind. And maybe the most surprising, and I think she actually wrestled in a match, was longtime porn actress Jasmine St. Clair, who was actually most known in her wrestling tenure for being the Blue Meanie's significant other. I don't think they ever got married, but at no point would I ever say Jasmine St. Clair is ugly. At many points, I would say the Blue Meanie is ugly. And the Blue Meanie, either through low self-esteem on her end, really good personality on his end, or massively hung brain power, if you will, on Minnie's end, was able to convince Jasmine St. Clair to be with him for some degree in time. And I think that is commendable. Now, granted, she really didn't have any reason not to be with him. I mean, if she saw someone hotter, she could just do a movie with him. So it's not really that much of a pressing relationship issue for her. I would like to have a conversation with Meanie and ask him how he handled that, because that's got to be a hard thing to deal with, right? Especially at the time when he was fat. Because he's been known to be a bigger dude for some time, so I can't imagine his self-esteem was too great at that time. But that's a whole different conversation for a whole different day. Some of the more impressive names, and I use impressive loosely. I have this name in the impressive list, but it should be in the surprising list. One Ken Anderson, future Ken Kennedy, then future TNA World Champion Ken Anderson, appeared on early NWA TNA television as well. I put him in the wrong category, sorry. He should have been in the surprising names. So the biggest names that they had, either for their entirety of '02 or for brief periods or for one-offs, were Six Pac and Scott Hall, who actually at one point were part of a tag team, which I really liked. And when BG James came in, I thought that could have been the I was of the understanding that was like going to be the pre-Three Live crew, but Waltman couldn't stay cognitive, and Hall couldn't stay at all, apparently. So that ended up being curtailed, and BG would later form Three Live Crew with Killings and Conan. Two more wrestlers who are both reliable. So that was going to be a fun thing that never happened, and was really a big staple of what TNA was hoping to have. But what are you going to do? Jarrett, we obviously mentioned. Fun factoid: Steve Corino popped around a few times in the first few weeks of the company. Now, I don't think Stevie Corino would ever have been, CM Punk levels of popular in TNA, but he could have easily have kind of slid in and been a main eventer with Killings and Jarrett, especially after Shamrock ups and leaves for the UFC, because Shamrock was supposed to be the guy. With all due respect to Killings, Jarrett never wanted the belt to be on him so fast because Jarrett had foreseen Shamrock having a year plus run. That obviously never came to fruition. So Corino could have been a big help in that promotion. Buff Bagwell was another name who popped around a few times. None of these names outside of Jarrett or BG James were consistent. Well, actually, no, that's not true. There's two more of that were. Jarrett and BG James were tenured members of the roster going forward. So was Ron and Don Harris, but they were more tenured personnel members. They didn't spend all their time wrestling. Ron and Don were in charge of the ring crew, traveling, the security, both in real life at the Nashville Asylum and on TV with the independent talents that they would put in the security jerseys or shirts, if you will. So the Harrises had a long tenure, but the rest of these names did not. They were either there for a week or two and then gone, or they were there for a while. One of them came in a lot later on, and that's Elite Skipper. Skipper early on in TNA didn't have a guaranteed spot or a consistent role, but he would by the end of the year. Kid Cash also popped up a few times early on, and he would, much like Skipper, get a long run in, but not any time in the immediate future. Shark Boy, same thing. Brian Lawler. Yeesh. For some reason, people wanted to make Brian Lawler work, but he, like Ron Killings, could not get rid of his WWE gimmick, either by choice or by desire. They kept him in that stupid ass outfit with the stupid ass gimmick and the stupid ass dance, and shockingly enough, he could never get over. Cool figure. Tony Mamaluke, Little Guido, former member of the FBI. No, Little Guido, right? Nunzio and Little Guido weren't the same person. I think Tony Mamaluke and Little Guido were. Either way, he was in WCW, he was in ECW, he was in TNA, he was in WWE. He's been around. And he actually retired not that long ago. Then you had, in my personal opinion, the biggest name WCW could have had at the end of their tenure, Jason Jett, a.k.a. Easy Money. I'm being facetious when I say that. I only recognize Jet from one thing that he ever did, and it was from having a stupid-ass wrestling attire and an ugly ponytail and wrestling, I want to say, Kiwi on the opening match of WCW Greed of 2001, which would have basically be their third-to-last show, if I remember correctly. So, fun stuff there, folks. But that's not the worst of it, and we'll get to that later. To give you an idea, though, who TNA had in terms of great workers, they did have some names, and not all of them were great talkers, though, and that was kind of the issue with this era of TNA. Their best talkers were Jarrett, Daniels, and Killings. But they did have a slew of an amazing talent. They had Jimmy Wang Yang, who was then known as just Jimmy Yang, and he was paired up with Sonny Siaki, and we'll get to why they were not Impact players later on. Of course, Jerry Lynn, who was never known to being a great promo guy. AMW, who would learn to be good promo guys. Amazing Red, who still to this day can't cut a promo. We already mentioned Killings, and Christopher Daniels was maybe the complete package at the time, but he was a little bit undersized and didn't have a dynamic enough look to stand out to be a world champion at that time. Now, we all know that he is now in Ring of Honor, but that's because of years of blood, sweat, and tears and legacy have been established. At this time, he was the guy who almost signed with WCW, actually did sign with WCW, but got hurt. And then the company went out of business, so what are you going to do? Low Key is another name that falls on that list. AJ Styles is another name that falls on that list. So not exactly a who's who. It's not like today if you started a wrestling company and signed like a Timothy Thatcher, who now granted would be along the lines of a Low Key or an Amazing Red in terms of promo skills. But at least there'd be more people today who know about Timothy Thatcher than at that time who knew about Amazing Red. So it's kind of interesting the differences, if you will. But let's get to the bad gimmicks, because, God, there's a few of them. Oh, God. We've already mentioned the Dicks. They wrestled in cream-colored bodysuits with pointy masks. They were trying to be walking, talking wrestling fellatios. So, what you gonna do about that? Jimmy Yang and Sonny Siaki. They were they were the Flying Elvises with Jorge Estrada. They were exactly as you think they would be. They were a wacky combination of the Young Dragons meets Three Count meets Ernest the Cat Miller. It was they were trying to embody a old school performance in terms of Elvis, performer I should say, in the ways of Elvis, and trying to be like a parody of the Elvis Presley impersonators in Nashville and in Las Vegas. But what ended up happening is just stunted their careers. Now Siaki would rebound in TNA. He would actually become a major player in. Well, I don't want to talk about them yet. But he would become a major player. He even won the X Division title at one point before going off to WWE on a developmental deal where he was paired with Alpha Jr., Manu, and what I believe the team was called the Samoan SWAT team, I think is what they were called. But no, they weren't the Samoan SWAT team. They were something. It was him and Alpha, but Siaki actually ended up retiring from wrestling because he gave his kidney to his brother. I think it was his brother. And, when you only have one kidney, you're advised to no longer do contact sports due to any blunt force trauma that could cause bleeding or swelling, and then you might go into premature renal failure. It's a long listing of reasons why you shouldn't do contact sports with one kidney. So Siaki retired on the behest of his doctors, but he was still a very integral part of this early TNA roster, and had he been given a chance to spread his wings and had he stayed with the company, I do believe by '04 or '05 he would have been a world champion because he had a great look, could talk, eventually found his way to being able to talk. And he kind of reminded me of a smaller Batista who could actually do like flippies and stuff. So, Siaki. Another bad gimmick was the SAT. Jose and Joel Maximo, the real life cousins of Amazing Red. They weren't really a tag team with a gimmick so much as they had a terrible fucking name. At the time, now some people have given it maybe a different take on occasion, but at the time, and to the best of my abilities, I know this team as the Spanish announce team. That was it. That was their entire shtick. That was it. They were the SAP button of the pro wrestling world. So I don't know. When you're cousins with Amazing Red, and Amazing Red in 2002 2003 before he blew his knee out was maybe the fastest worker. He reminded me more than anyone of a young Rey Mysterio, and I think Rey Mysterio in circa 1997 1996 maybe was the prettiest wrestler that you'd ever see. And Amazing Red was quickly surpassing that before his own knee injuries. So to basically have your cousins be known as the Spanish announce team, it's embarrassing. It really is. Now, I'm kind of torn on the next two gimmicks because they are both equally bad. I'm going to go with the one that's illegal, though, over the one that's... Because they're both offensive, but there's one that's illegal. Now, the just offensive one is the West Hollywood Blondes, former Lenny and Lodi, and eventually Bruce, who was known as Alan Funk on the Indies, and was doing a Funkamania gimmick in World Wrestling All-Stars, which I thought was hilarious. So the three of them became the West Hollywood Blondes. Now, if you know or remember your wrestling history, Brian Pillman and Steve Austin were known as the Hollywood Blondes. I don't know why. Neither was from Hollywood. But there you go. In this reality, though, in TNA, West Hollywood, and this isn't just this reality, I should say, like this is all reality. West Hollywood is considered to be the quote-unquote gay sector of LA. It's where a lot of businesses and people and entertainment, a lot of drag queens, a lot of drag kind of entertainment is centered in West Hollywood. So TNA's great idea, or I think Ed Ferrara pitched this, or whoever, thought that we should have a gay tag team who we once used to call brothers in WCW, by the way. We should have them be a gay tag team, and we should have them be heels because straight people in the South don't like gay people, right? To say Glad had a problem with this would be an understatement. They tried to do this gimmick in WCW actually, and it got lambasted and put on hold. But they tried it again in TNA, and yeah. And as tasteless as that was, as tasteless as being homophobic was, the next tag team just kind of takes the cake. Cause holy shitballs, was this just weird. So first and foremost, I need to put out this and make it be known that Trevor Murdoch was in this tag team. These were the Dups. The Dups. You heard me right. The Dups. Now, what you didn't know about the Dups was that Stand Up was one of the members, and I think they had a brief spell in ECW for maybe a little bit. It was Stand Up and Bo Dup. And I forgot who Bo Dup was. I think Bo Dup was... I don't think you guys would know him. So I don't even think it's worth going into. His name's Otto Swans. So... The Dups were... What's the best way to put this? They were known to being stereotypical southern rednecks. They liked their tobacco, their NASCAR. They didn't like their minorities. But they had a cousin. If I remember correctly, she was the cousin, not the sister, but the cousin, by the name of Fluffed Up. And they not so coyly teased that Fluffed Up had a reoccurring relationship with her fellow family members. Now, in any state in the good old U.S. of A., that would be illegal. So I thought that was a little over the line, so to speak. And Fluffed Up was played by Rebecca Briggs. And I don't think her career ever recovered from that. So it's a little kind of like, ugh, that this existed, that this was kind of the thing. But when you look at the fact that all these teams I mentioned, by the way, the Dicks, the Dups, the West Hollywood Blondes, the Flying Elvises, all this came at the same time. Like, they inundated the roster with just shit. It was shit gimmicks that made people offended, and wrestlers with name value who couldn't attend shows because they either were already booked, got signed elsewhere, or were just too hungover from their most recent high. The fact we got to a fall, and I don't mean like the fall, I mean like the season of autumn. The fact we got through June, July, and August to get to autumn was just... Now, I will say this. By late September, the inconsistencies in booking, the trash-tastic roster, a lot of that would be phased out. From, say, September onward, yes, you had to deal with more Brian Lawlers, and Kurt Hennig would debut, and David Flair didn't debut yet, but would. You had to deal with some of that, but at least the talent became consistent. Because prior to that, you never knew who was going to be on each show unless they were kind enough to tell you who was showing up the next week. And even sometimes then they didn't do that because they didn't know. Or sometimes they'd be like, we'd have a title fight between Scott Hall and Ken Shamrock, and then Scott Hall wouldn't show up. Now, I don't think that specific instance happened, but it was more for instance. So by the time September and October rolled around, which is when I think Dixie Carter became involved both financially and as an overseer, that's when things started to kind of taper off and stabilize. All the trashy gimmicks were gone. The trashiest gimmick you'd have is the New Church, and at the time they were just trying to be a Ministry of Darkness type with Slash and Malice and Brian Lee, I think, at one point. They didn't really have too much going on. They had a female valet by the name of Belladonna, not the same Belladonna who was a porn star. And James Mitchell was their mouthpiece. They would end up holding the NWA Tag Team titles for a brief spell in the late 2002 time period. So that's not too bad, all things considering. And anytime you have Mitchell with anyone, it's just thumbs up. So the big issue in the fall of 2002 was a very undefined main event scene and still no real career or promotion defining feuds. Yes, you had Styles and Lynn, which was at best a good feud, and you had Killings and Jarrett, which was at best an okay feud. But they tried to shoehorn BG James in the main event scene. Kurt Hennig, either due to his back, either due to the pay, due to when they could afford him and Jarrett could never get anything consistent. And then when he was there, he was losing in 5 minutes. So again, they made a lot of very questionable decisions in 2002. The fact we got to a 2003 is impressive. Now, there it was some major moments, though, that I think is worth talking about in 2004. Kurt Hennig's debut on October 9th is one of them. I do believe that was one of the more impressive times that TNA had ever had at that point. When Kurt Hennig popped up with a brand new singlet, by the way. He had like some kind of like funky ass like patterns now on his singlet, which is brand new. I thought that was a big deal. I was like, holy shit, this is a game changer. Because at the time it was. Hennig, it was only a few months released from WWE. He had shown he can still go, and if his back held up, he would have been a big star. Now, I don't know why he wasn't booked that way, and of course, eventually his demons caught up with him as he passed away early in 2003. I think it was early in 2003. So that wasn't great. But it was still a moment that's worth talking about. Ron Killings winning the NWA World title we talked about earlier, which was a huge moment, not just for TNA or the NWA or for wrestling, but for black wrestlers and the black community in general. You got to see somebody win the top title and be predominantly featured as a top talent. He had a lot of matches where, granted, he was the heel, but he won clean and won convincingly. And I think that's, again, another statement to some of the things they did right in that era. Of course, the Tennessee Titans attacking Jeff Jarrett was a huge moment to close the show on July 10th. Frank Wycheck and I want to say Fred... It was Fred something. He was an offensive tackle, if I remember correctly. They jumped the railing and attacked Jeff Jarrett. I think somebody else did too. And then the New Church came down and attacked Jarrett whilst the NFL players attacked. It was a really weird and nonsensical segment, but it was cool and it got people talking. And that's kind of what's important. And outside of Styles winning the X Division and tag team titles at the same time in back-to-back weeks, I think is what it was. I think the biggest moment at the time, because of what it meant and what it would mean, was the first night that Christopher Daniels, Loki, and Elite Skipper ever tagged together on December 18th. Because if you talk about AMW, it's not Brian Lee and Slash, it's not the New Church, it's not the West Hollywood Blondes or Styles and Lynn, or the Dupes, or the Hot Shots, Cassidy Riley and Chase Stevens. It was Triple X that you associated them with. That was their prime feud. And for 3 years, from 03, 04, and 05, not really 05, so like 2 years, 03 and 04, these two tag teams went to war with one another. And to see the first night they tagged, and I think it was against Amazing Red and the SAT. It was a watershed night for what TNA would have, because while 03 was just lined with shit, 03 built upon the building blocks that 02 set, and 02 did not set many. Heading out of 02, we had Chris Park, who had really yet to find his groove. He was part of Red Shirt Security, I think. He was just as so he was kind of floating around. They hadn't really found his thing yet. In fact, he was working a lot of dark matches. You had AMW, you had Styles, Jerry Lynn was healthy. You're going forward with Kurt Hennig and Jeff Jarrett and hopefully Scott Hall on your roster, and two of those three didn't pan out. One for a very tragic reason, and then the other for probably, if you want to be honest, even more of a tragic reason, because Kurt Hennig he left us. Scott Hall chose to embrace his demons, and that's horrifying. But I digress. They were not in a good place. not those two specific wrestlers. I mean TNA as a whole. Like they did not, after that first 6 months, have enough in place by December to really make you think, we're on the right path now. So when you look at the roster and what they're able to do, survive, what they're able to put into place at the end of 2002, not great, but better than how they started. You know, if you look at that first 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 9 weeks, if that's how the company went going forward, I never would have gotten into it at all. You had segments where midgets were jerking off in cans. I swear to God, that was an actual segment. You had misused talent. You had top talent being used in opening matches. It was nonsense. I don't know what they knew what they were doing at the time. But obviously things did stabilize in 03, even though it had a lot more Vince Russo. And typically speaking, I think Vince Russo makes things worse. 03 provided with a shitload of fine and amazing moments, matches. It established names. It brought back others. It made wrestling exciting again, even if it wasn't always the most coherent and just logical nonsense, because sometimes it was bad. Yeah, sometimes it was real bad. I don't know when I'm going to get to 03. It'll probably be sometime this week, and I'm going to try to go through these year by year, especially the first, especially during the Jarrett era between 2002 and 2009. I also recorded a video for Roto Wrestling All-Stars I'm going to get rid of and refilm that because I need to do a better job with that. Although I did actually a pretty decent job with it. I just think I can do better. So here we go. I'm glad you guys listened to this whole thing. I know it's long. I know we're pushing 40 plus minutes or so, if not longer. I can talk a lot, but there's also a lot of things to talk about. And then in a few days, we'll talk about 2003 TNA. Let me know what you thought of early TNA. 2002. Strictly 02. From June 17th or whatever it was to December 19th. Because they ended up having 2 weeks off at the end of the year. Tell me what you thought about that. Was it good? Did you enjoy it? Were things entertaining? Was it terrible? Did it shock you, horrify you? Are you surprised we're still here as fans or detractors of TNA after that initial 6 months? Because I'll tell you what, I damn sure am. Reliving these first 6 months made me realize just how close this company should have been dead. Heading into mid-September, you could have killed this company. I would have been like, well, guess we got to try again. Because the first 2-3 months of this promotion were shit. Thank God for AJ Styles, Jay Lynn, and Loki. That's all I'll say about that. So, subscribe, follow us on Twitter at NerdCorp. Find us on Tumblr at nerdcorp.tumblr.com. Go to the website, realnerdcorp.com. Listen to us on Mixler.com every Monday at 10 p.m. for SportsCore, where we talk sports. Every Tuesday at 10 p.m., where we record live Brand Banter, which we upload to YouTube. Wednesdays at 9, where we talk wrestling. And Brand Banter, for those of you who don't know, is a WWE recap show. Thursdays at 10, we record Comic Core. If you miss any of these, you can go, you just click on the link below in the little description box, or you can go to mixler.com/nerdcorp/showreel, SHOWREEL, and you'll be able to find our archive for the past few months, and check that out if you missed any of the old shows and you want to participate. And outside of that, thanks for listening, guys, and we'll talk to you soon.